Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. Hope you had a great week. As always, I want to give you an update on what has happened in Washington, D.C. this week. Just in case you didn't catch our live Q&A yesterday, you can always find out what's going on in our Week in Review videos. So last week, we talked about the Biden administration's attempt to negotiate a new Iran nuclear deal. This has been ongoing since this administration took over. They've been trying to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. This week, in a hearing of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the two committees that I sit on, I questioned Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. She's the #2 in charge of the Department of State, and I asked her about those efforts. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar, Deputy Secretary Sherman was a key negotiator in the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Her and John Kerry were the two that were negotiating that. Now, at that time, she said this, that having a strong military position to back up their diplomatic efforts was key in their negotiations. But when I asked her if she thought the military was in that same position of strength under President Biden, she refused to answer. You believe that if Iran were to be on the cusp of a nuclear weapon right this moment, that General Milley would launch an attack, use military action, as you said was so important for you to be able to negotiate.
Congressman,
you have to say that credibly.
Congressman, I'm not going to deal today in a hypothetical because it would depend upon
That's what
many
you
factors.
did previously. I will answer for her. It is not. President Biden's weakness in every situation from Afghanistan to Ukraine means that we are not negotiating from a position of strength. We should not be negotiating any sort of nuclear deal with a rogue nation like Iran, using Russia, who we are arming people to fight against as we speak, using Russia as the intermediary, while at the same time Iran is trying to sell all of their fuel to the world because the world has a global shortage of fuel because of things like President Biden's energy policies, and we definitely should not be negotiating in a way that gives that regime the upper hand, the ability to threaten the United States and all of our allies across the globe. Speaking of rogue nations and murderous dictators, this week the House voted on a bipartisan bill entitled the Ukraine Invasion, War Crimes, Deterrent, and Accountability Act. This legislation states very simply that the United States can and will collect evidence of war crimes committed by Vladimir Putin and his army of thugs during the invasion and the occupation of Ukraine. Now, I voted in favor of this legislation because the Russians have committed war crimes. Anyone who has turned on the news lately has seen that. We've had classified briefings about that, and they must be held accountable for what they're doing to the Ukrainian people. But I think this bill ultimately was just a way for members of Congress to actually ease their conscience for doing not enough, instead of making the tough calls as it relates to actually going out there and supporting Ukraine more and more. If you look back in history, we were not planning the Nuremberg trials for Hitler's thugs while we were in the middle of planning D-Day and the liberation of Europe. That is to say, what the Ukrainians need from the United States right now is weapons that will allow them to stop the war crimes that are occurring, the murder of the men, women, and children across their country, against everybody that is trying to fight against this Russian invasion. They need help in that fight, not a promise that the world will hold the Russians accountable when this is all over and tens of thousands have been murdered or lined up in front of a hole in the ground and then shot so that they fall into that hole. That's not what they need right now. I will continue to urge my colleagues and the administration to step up and do more to support President Zelensky and this fight against Russian tyranny, Russian aggression, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The House also voted on a bill called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and Replenishment Act. Now, this bill would allocate another $60 billion with a B, for restaurants impacted by COVID-19. Now, I voted against this bill, and this is why. Stay-at-home orders and government mandates put a huge burden on restaurants and small businesses during the beginning of the pandemic. A number of states went in their own direction. Florida chose the right of freedom, while you still have states like California and New York and places like Washington, D.C. that are locking their businesses down and affecting their bottom line. Through no fault of their own, businesses were declared non-essential at the beginning of COVID. They were forced to close their doors. But now, over 2 years later, those restrictions are thankfully in our rearview mirror. States can put those policies in their rearview mirror like Florida has done, and these programs need to be in our rearview mirror as well. Throwing more money at a broken program is not the answer for our economy. What Congress should be focused on is getting spending under control, addressing the policies that are leading to the largest levels of inflation that our nation has seen. Less government spending means less inflation. Less inflation means Main Street job creators and entrepreneurs are able to keep their small businesses running and get our economy moving in the way that it should be. The fact of the matter is, the largest input to making food items and crops and anything at our grocery store more expensive is the fuel cost. Whether getting those items put in the ground or getting them out of the ground, put in a truck, and taking that truck to the grocery store or to the restaurant, that is the largest cost, are the energy prices. So if we don't get energy under control in the United States of America in a way contrary to what President Biden is doing, then we will continue to see prices rise. Lastly, I want to give a quick update on our fight to end vaccine mandates for people in the military. This week, I signed onto a letter to protect young people in the ROTC, in colleges and service academies, who exercise their right to make their own medical choices and not get a vaccine. Now, when you join the ROTC or enroll in one of our nation's service academies, your education is paid for your service to our country, contingent on that service in the military after graduation. If you're removed from the program for any reason, you are responsible for paying back the military for your cost of education. So what are they trying to do? They are trying to kick people out of the ROTC programs that are off in college for not getting the COVID-19 vaccine, and as a result, claw back the dollars that have been spent on them in the ROTC programs. This is another thing that I will continue to fight against. It's absolutely nonsensical. It weakens our military now. It weakens the future of our military, our ability to defend our country. It's just a wrong policy for America. In that, I'll always be in the fight. I'll continue to keep you updated on everything that's going on here in Washington, D.C. I look forward to seeing you all around home. You all take care.